Here we are with Fine Arts Media, Drawing Renaissance to Contemporary, and this is presentation number 3. So the key points to this presentation are: what is drawing, identifying materials, purpose, techniques, elements of art and principles of design, and tradition versus modernity. We've seen this before. This slide was in the very first presentation, Fundamentals. So you'll know that this is literally just a list of some of the uses and types of drawing. And we'll talk initially about what drawing is. So essentially, drawing is a technique in which images are depicted on a surface by making lines. Although drawings can also contain tonal areas, washes, and other non-linear marks. The formation of a line by drawing some kind of tracing instrument from point to point on a surface, representation by lines, delineation as distinguished from painting, the arrangement of lines which determine form. That is a definition from the Oxford Dictionary. And it's often thought that an artist's stroke is the purest way to perceive their abilities. A line winds across a paper or a canvas. The continuous band can emit powerful emotions. It's no surprise that line art or line drawings are one of the most basic elements of visual art. In fact, out of the 7 visual elements, as we saw before, line is the fundamental element. A line can be 2-dimensional, but it can also imply 3-dimensionality. Can drawing be thinking? Why do we draw? There are many different reasons. So we visualize thought and work things out. We provide a pattern to follow or give instructions to make something or do something, or to warn us, like a traffic sign. We can help clients visualize something that we propose for them. We can describe or record something in the sense of recording an image of a portrait or an image of a machine for future generations or for somebody else trying to make that object. And another reason is purely for pleasure, or to express the invisible, as in perhaps drawing a dream or something that has never been seen before. Drawing media in this case means the stuff we use to draw, and the list here is pastel, so it can be chalk or it can be oil pastel, literally made out of pure pigments added to a binder of some sort. Charcoal, which is carefully burnt wood. Colored pencils, where the pigment is bound and embedded into a wooden holder. Conte, where the pigments are in a compressed form of chalk. a crayon, which is usually wax, so the pigment is embedded in the wax in that case, graphite, which can be sticks, or the graphite can be embedded inside wood to make a pencil, markers, where we have a fabric, felt tip with the pigment in a liquid form, and then which is preserved, and then we have simple pen and ink, and it's not on this list, but we can also use gold and silver. What we draw on, so those are the media, then we also have what we draw, what we draw with, and then what we draw on. So we have canvas, paper, tracing paper, plaster, metal, and wood, possibly brick, concrete as well. Chalk. So we're going to go through here, we're going to look in just a little bit more detail at what each material is and does. And I have taken from the Tate Modern reference area for their definitions. So chalk is a powdery writing or drawing material in crayon form, generally used on a blackboard or other darker ground. The ground is what we draw on. Chalk is an inorganic material composed of calcium carbonate. It is naturally occurring, but has also been produced industrially throughout the 20th century. And the example of art that we have here is from Tacita Dean. It's called The Roaring Forties. Charcoal. Charcoal is a black, crumbly drawing material made of carbon, often used for sketching and underdrawing for paintings, although it can also be used to create more finished drawings. Charcoal is traditionally made from thinly peeled willow twigs, which are heated without the presence of oxygen. This produces the black, crumbly sticks, which leave microscopic particles on the paper or textile fibers, producing a line that is dense at the pressure point, but more diffuse or powdery at the edges. The overall result is less precise than hard graphite pencils, so charcoal is suited to freer studies. Charcoal smudges easily and is often protected with a sprayed fixative. The example of a charcoal drawing that we have here is by Leon Kossoff, and it is a self-portrait from 1967. Graphite. Graphite is a metallic, grey, writing and drawing material most commonly used in pencil form, though graphite powder is also used by artists as a drawing material. Graphite is a crystalline form of carbon and is useful as a writing and drawing tool, as only the slightest pressure is needed to leave a mark. It has a greasy texture and a dull, metallic, grey colour. Graphite is a stable and permanent material, but can be easily removed using an eraser. Graphite is soft and brittle also. Unless being used as a drawing material in powder form, it does require some form of protective casing. The exact date and origin of the first graphite sticks or pencils is unknown, but it is thought that the first graphite sticks encased in wood appeared around 1565, shortly after the discovery of natural graphite in Cumberland, Britain. Graphite also occurs naturally in Siberia, Bavaria, in Germany, and in the United States of America. It can, however, be made by heating up cokes at high temperature, known as the Acheson process. So, Here we have, as an example, we have a drawing by Carl Andre, which is Drawing for the Perfect Painting, in which he's used a geometric patterned paper to start with. Ink. Here we have ink as a drawing medium. It's a very ancient medium in a liquid or paste form. Traditionally, it is black or brown in color, although it also can contain colored dyes or pigments. Ink is still most commonly made of carbon with a form of binder. But historically, it was also made from plant or animal sources such as iron, gall, and sepia. It is traditionally used with sable brushes or varieties of quill, reed, or pen. Historically, drawings have been made by applying ink with a quill pen made by cutting the hollow stem of a large feather from a bird, such as a goose or a swan, to create a nib. Hollow reeds were also cut in the same way and used for writing and drawing. Metal pens succeeded the quill during the 19th century. Pen and ink is often used in conjunction with other techniques such as washes, which is where the ink has been diluted with water. In this drawing by Marlene Dumas, Magdalena 1, we see ink used in a loose and expressive way, and the very, very dark elements are allowed to drip and create a feeling of impermanence and slight abstraction. So that was the media. We've talked about the things that we use to draw with. So we have the media and we have the ground, which is what we draw on. Here we have a list of drawing techniques. So there are very many different ways to draw. And we have, so let's start with automatic blind contour drawing, which is an action performed where the artist looks at the object and does not look at the canvas or ground. Chiaroscuro is a term which means light and dark and uses strong contrasts to achieve a sense of volume in modeling a three-dimensional object. Gesture drawing is a loose form of drawing or sketching with the wrists moving to create a sense of naturalism in the line or shape, which is opposed to geometrical or mechanical drawing, which has precision and conveys something very specific. Grisaille hatching consists of hatching, contour hatching, and double contour hatching to create three-dimensionality and form. Masking, mass drawing, screen tones, scribbling, stippling. There are a multitude of ways to create marks on the paper. Lighter values, darker values, blending, depending on the intent of the artist. Here we have painting from the caves in Lascaux in France. These are estimated to be 20,000 years old, and we see the use of ochre, which is an earth pigmented with iron and metals to create the color. We also see in the black areas the use of soot and charcoal, possibly mixed with animal fat as a binder. So it's also possible that they burnt bones and created a color called bone black, and the white they would have formed from ground calcite, which was known as lime white. As time has gone by, we have become much more advanced in the sense of our creation of art materials. And here we have, but we're still using these very, very ancient materials. So Fiona Tang is a Chinese artist who creates these extraordinarily dynamic and powerful imagery of animals, and she often does them on giant pieces of paper in a specific environment. And sometimes the drawing actually comes off the paper and onto, say, the wall of the gallery. If you think about value, it's very clear that a lot of the drama in these images is due to her exceptional use of values from the darkest dark to the lightest light. So she also uses chalk for the lightest area, and she employs a technique of creating more definition for focus in certain areas, like in the teeth in this shark, and in the nose of the whale. And then she blends the image, uses value to blend off into a kind of semi-abstracted area around the edge. And this last image from her shows how the legs of the deer actually go down to the floor of the gallery, and it also shows how she uses these pieces of paper that look like scrappy fragments of wrapping paper or something like that, which increases the illusion of reality and depth. From as far back as the Renaissance, artists have used gold and silver to rub onto the paper to create a very subtle but lasting surface. Here we have a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, a study for a figure for the Battle of Anghiari. And we can see the same techniques that Fiona Tang is using, where we have areas which are much more defined and areas which become almost abstracted and are unfinished. This particular drawing is made with a red Conte chalk on vellum, which is a specific kind of heavyweight, smooth surfaced paper. Here we have another drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, and he worked and worked and worked on creating expressive faces. So he studied anatomy in great detail in order to be able to recreate the flesh, the muscles, the surface over the invisible structure beneath. This one is made with either graphite, it doesn't actually say, but I would imagine it's either graphite or charcoal. It looks more like graphite to me. We have a couple more Leonardo drawings since they are so masterful. This one is the head of Saint Philip. And what's interesting about this is the minimal use of material. In other words, the minimal use of shading and form to create an extraordinary illusion of reality, which then has a sense of abstraction where it becomes less detailed. This drawing here is a multiple sketches of creatures, lions, cats, and dragons. And I am pretty sure that this is a kind of brown ink, which is made from oak gall. But Leonardo would sketch over and over again and sometimes create these multiple images on one page. Here we have a silver point. This we know was made of silver on parchment, a head of a woman. And the use of line, we'll talk more about this later, but we can see here there are several types of line that are employed here. We have the edges, where the edges are clear, that is outline, and then we have lines which are simply implied. So those are contour lines. So we talk about dry and liquid drawing. So those drawings we've been exploring are dry. This one is liquid. In other words, it was used, ink was used to create this drawing of two grotesque profiles. This is pen and brown ink over the top. It also has black chalk on vellum, and it's an architectural drawing. Now we are going to have a little look at the magnificent drawings of Michelangelo Buonarroti, and they are studies of the human figure, anatomy, and made in the spirit of trying to understand how to express the human body, but also emotion through the human body as dramatically and as realistically as possible. And in order to do this, he made many, many studies of musculature and skeletal structure to try to really understand how the skin would overlay those underlying structures. So Michelangelo was famous for looking at the structure, the anatomy of corpses to try to really understand more about the human body. And this was quite shocking. I think probably still would be today, but in those days was particularly shocking. But one of the reasons why he is able to express the human body so superbly is because of the multiple drawings that he made to help him understand. You can see here the structure of the back, very carefully rendered from 1511. This drawing here is a silver point of a head of a child from the 1520s. Michelangelo was a poet as well as a sculptor, a painter, an architect, and he would write poetry on his drawings and send them to his friends. They were, in a lot of ways, like a diary or a journal, and they showed his thoughts and his creative process. In Northern Europe, printmaking was developed as and used as an extension of drawing. Here we have an engraving which would have been made on metal, and then ink would be rolled into the scratched out areas and then wiped carefully off, and damp paper laid over the top. This is called a print engraving. Charles Darwin, the scientific evolutionist, created these beautiful scientific illustrations with pen and ink on paper. He was an English naturalist, geologist, and biologist, and he traveled all over the world trying to understand how humans and creatures evolved. Drawing is defined by its materials, its purpose, its techniques, the picture plane, the elements of art, and the principles of design. So we can think specifically in terms of the elements of art, in terms of line, value, and space. How can drawing be innovative? So in other words, one of the more traditional uses for artistic drawing was to represent reality. Especially in a time when there was no photography, drawings were very important for prospective husbands and brides to see their future partners, for kings and queens and important people to be remembered, to try to envision the idea of the sacred. But in modern times, drawing has become something a little different. So, how do modern artists perceive drawing, and how do they push the limits of what drawing can be? Here we have a drawing by Pablo Picasso, which is a portrait of Igor Stravinsky, the composer, and this was drawn in 1920. It's a great example of a blind contour drawing where the artist has drawn looking as little as possible at the paper upon which he is drawing. And it's in the spirit of trying to capture the essence of the subject as opposed to the surface. Bridget Riley created screen prints, which is another way to use line. She was fascinated by optical illusions and specifically how lines can change a surface. Here we have a painting which is oil on linen. But the painting is almost exclusively about line and value and space. It's not representing anything particular, but the lines have been painted meticulously to create these semi-organic grid patterns. So Bruce Pollock is challenging, in a sense, the purpose of painting by creating a drawing made of painting materials. Here we have a drawing by Liliana Porter. It's called Blue Drawings, and it's a collage on paper. So essentially it's a scribble. But you can see if you look carefully down at the bottom that there is a tiny figure and a piece of string. So it's an illusion which brings three-dimensionality into a two-dimensional medium. Hong Chung Zhang created life strands, these enormous and highly realistic, oversized, overscaled drawings of hair. And they are created with charcoal, so they are meticulously drawn. And she is challenging the idea of the vertical surface being the one upon which we view drawings. And she's referencing her cultural heritage by using the scroll, which rolls down from the top of the wall and out along the floor. This kind of presentation of art is known as an installation. We're back to Richard Long again, and here we have a print which is made out of mud, and this is actually made out of mud and water. The ground in the bottom half is white, and in the top half it's black, and it has a sense of rootlets or a forest. It has a very organic feel, almost representational, and yet it is completely abstract. He's challenging the use of drawing materials by using mud and water. Again, he's using mud and water on a giant scale on a wall. This is called mud ring. And here's another mud ring made of a whitish kind of mud in a public place. Again, it is ephemeral art which will not last. This drawing made by Anna Barnable is called Brick Wall, and it is very textural in the sense of creating a very economical visual experience, and it is highly detailed and meticulously made at a very, very slow pace with a particular focus on the material. So this is obviously an abstract image. It's not representing anything specific. And we can look at it and imagine or experience in the actual looking the primary source when we look at an artwork itself rather than an image of an artwork. That's called the primary source. And very often with an artwork like this, it's very hard to interpret until you actually see it. Louise Despont uses colored pencils to create very, very meticulous abstract drawings. And again, there was this idea of slow making. They're on a very large scale. And watching her create these and talk about them is quite fascinating. The color scheme is pastel. It is a very limited range of values, which gives it a delicate and non-invasive kind of a quality. And here we have working drawings from a sculptor called Robert Rauschenberg. So he created a painting with the sculptural element of a stuffed sheep. And here you see the drawings which show how he was thinking as he worked. And you can see that the studies are in pencil and ink, perhaps to get a sense of three-dimensionality, and you can see things are crossed out. So these epitomize the idea of a working sketch. So the last thing that I'm going to say about drawing is that ultimately it's about conveying perception. Maybe all art is, but drawing is particularly about this. And so something you can try for fun is to try drawing something upside down. This way you access the right side of your brain, which creates a more intuitive kind of seeing. You can also experiment with contour drawing, where you sit and maybe draw a friend or a family member while they're watching TV, perhaps, and you try not to look at the paper that you're drawing on and see if you can capture a little bit more of their essence in that way.